Cowan's here, and today I'm joined by Hall of Famer, the legendary Randy the Natural Couture. Randy, always a pleasure to get some of your time. How are things with you today?
Doing really well, thanks. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate you.
The pleasure's all mine. We've just come off the first week of the PFL Challenger series.
Mm-hmm.
What did you make of the performances on the show, and obviously the rest of the series going forwards?
Well, obviously pretty impressive. And we've seen other guys come out of the Challenger series last season and go all the way through. Carlos Leal made it to the semifinals. Delano Taylor made it all the way to the finals. They gave another contract last week, so a lot of talent, rich talent pool, and development with the Challenger series has been very, very impressive.
Of both the Challenger series that we have running from now till about March, and then PFL Europe, which will kick off at the end of March, is there a particular name across either organization or either function that you've got your eye on in particular?
Well, obviously, Brendan Loughnane took the world by storm last season. Just an exciting fighter, struggled through a lot of adversity to get to the finals and then capitalized in a great fight in the final. I think he's going to be great. I really look forward to watching more of Dakota. She's a young talent in the featherweight division. I think she's going to definitely make a mark in PFL Europe. Amazing skill set for such a young female fighter, and just does an amazing job. Those two are definitely two to watch. It's a very, very rich pool of fighters coming out of the PFL. They're doing a great job. I love the meritocracy of this organization. It's not about talking smack. It's about going out and winning fights.
100%. Kayla actually told me that she, and I quote, called Dakota the future of women's MMA. Do you think she can go that far? Do you think she can fill the heights of the great Kayla Harrison?
Well, I mean, everybody aspires to that kind of greatness, right? Kayla has done an amazing job reinventing herself, a two-time gold medalist in judo, and just diligent, checks her ego at the door, puts herself out there in vulnerable situations, willing to risk it all to be the best. And I think that anybody who wants to be successful in this sport should be watching what she's doing and try to emulate that. And Dakota's no different. I think she's got a lot of talent. She's got a great head on her shoulders. She's driven by what her mother accomplished in kickboxing, and she wants to accomplish things in MMA. And I think she's well on her way.
100%. Kayla is obviously stepping away from the tournament this year. She'll be moving into the pay-per-view section of the PFL shows. With that being said, if we keep to the core tournament formula, who do you see as the next poster star, the next poster boy or girl who's going to really drive this 2023 season?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the lightweight division going away, the featherweights, and lightweight, and the changing of the guards in some respect with the change in weight classes in the PFL for the women's divisions. We certainly know that Kayla is capable of making 145. She did that in Invictus in the off year in 2020. Can Larissa Pacheco make 145 and still be the same fighter that we're used to seeing or have gotten used to seeing? That's a real question. What's going to happen with Larissa, who just won her first title? It's been a long journey trying to overcome the formidable Kayla Harrison, and she did a great job this last season. We've just seen her each and every year refine herself, come out and be a little more aggressive, a little more in shape and fit, and she's no fear there. She got out there and mixed it up. So it'll be interesting to see. That may just be a pay-per-view as well, to see the rematch between those two. I'd pay to watch that fight. That was a great fight in the first place. So really hard to say. A lot of amazing talent out there. I think we got Montague coming up. She fought in last year's Challenger Series. She's back this season. Did a rear naked choke last year. Be interesting to see how she matches up this year. We got another judoka from Mongolia coming into the featherweight division this year too, who's got a ton of ability, and can she make that transition to being a bona fide mixed martial artist? There's the question there, but there's a ton of talent. It's going to be fun to watch.
If the very anticipated trilogy between Kayla and Larissa, which I think everybody wants to see, and I think will eventually happen, if it was announced, let's say tomorrow morning, who is your money be on in terms of the favourites?
I don't think you ever want to face someone like Kayla Harrison after coming off a loss. She's very, very motivated. She's going to get about fixing the mistakes she made in that fight and coming back stronger than ever. I think the onus is always on the person that won the last fight. You know that person's going to make changes. You got to literally make a wild ass guess as to what those changes might be going into the next fight. And I think that always puts a little bit extra pressure on the person that won the last engagement. And that obviously will rest solely on Larissa Pacheco at this point. So it'll be interesting. But I think, obviously Francis Ngannou, free agent right now. I'm hoping that the PFL is on him and we can sign him to the heavyweight division. I would pay a lot of money to see him and Ante D'Elia hook it up in a pay-per-view as well. You get the Larissa Pacheco rematch. There's a ton of awesome fighters out there that will make great pay-per-views for the PFL. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting.
You mentioned his name, so I'd like to ask about Francis Ngannou. Obviously, as you mentioned, they're a free agent now currently. How, and I don't know how savvy you'll be to this kind of question, but how realistic do you think the PFL signing Francis Ngannou is at this moment?
I mean, I think anything's possible. I know Francis still wants to compete. Whether Francis, goes to a Bellator or one of the other organizations out there, or goes with the PFL. Or goes into boxing. There's a lot of scuttlebutt that he's interested in boxing as well. Obviously, he's got great punching power. I think he's still got some things to learn as a purebred boxer, but that would be interesting as well. I think Francis is doing what he thinks is best for his career, and standing up and shining a light on some of the disparaging difference in fighter pay and some of the other stuff that he's chirped about. And obviously that's a boat that I was in for quite a while with the company as well. So it is what it is. I didn't actually talk to Francis, contrary to popular belief, about what was going on with him. I did talk to Eric, and obviously Eric has Francis's ear and his main coach. So, I basically just told Eric, he needs to stand up for himself and do what he thinks is best for him, keep control of his career and do what's best for him in his career. And I think that's what he's tried to do.
I couldn't agree more. And obviously, as you alluded to, you had your own similar troubles at a stage in your career. With that being said, and given the fact that this is not necessarily about money, this is about principle. Eric told me last week this is about freedom on Francis's part, leaving the UFC. How bad of a look is it that the UFC heavyweight champion has left the organization because of a lack of freedom?
Well, I mean, we've seen this already. These types of things have been going on for quite some time. I mean, you hear jonjones chirping about fighter pay. Obviously, Jakepaul, who is another signing with the PFL, and there would be another great pay-per-view to fight. Get one of the Diaz brothers to step up and put that on a pay-per-view. Diaz and Jakepaul would be very interesting as well. But Jake is obviously, through these crossover matches in boxing, shined a light and poking Dana about fighter pay and the way he treats his fighters and all that too. So there's nothing new here going on. Obviously, I was in this beef almost from the start when Zuffa bought the company in 2001. That all kind of came to a head in 2006, 2007. So this has been an ongoing saga in kind of the growing pains of our sport. It's one of the reasons why I'm enjoying being involved in the PFL, because of the way they do business, because of this new format, and the way the fighters have stepped up and embraced that. It's been fun to be a part of that, and it's a great time to be a fighter. There's a lot of places to go to ply your wares and show your skills and make a living as a professional athlete, and that's a pretty significant thing in this society today. So, it'll be interesting. I think at some point, one of two things are going to happen. The Ollie Act is going to get amended and create transparency in our sport and eliminate some of these very restrictive contracts and some of the things that boxers have been enjoying since 1996 when that federal legislation was passed. The other thing that's going on in the back is the class action lawsuit. We've been certified as a class, so there's obviously some merit. There's some big lawyer firms that do these class action things that are spending their time and money to pursue this. So there's obviously some merit there. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds, and that will potentially change the way business is done in our sport as well. I think what we're all looking for is transparency. How am I supposed to negotiate my fair market price when nobody knows how much money these organizations are making on any given show. By any estimation I've seen, 13 to 15% of the revenue that comes in from any event goes to the athletes on that card. Show me another professional sport where that's the case. It's at least 50-50 split. Yeah. And boxing is significantly more than that. But you look at football, baseball, basketball, those players' associations have done a good job of, creating a minimum standard and giving basic care for those athletes to put their bodies and lives on the line every time they walk out on those fields. So it's no different in our sport until we get organized with a mixed martial arts fighters association, which I'm a spokesperson for. I think we're going to continue to get taken advantage of. Honestly, that's just the way it is.
No, of course it is, and it's a very, very important issue, and I think of an issue that any real fight fan or anybody who has any care for the fighters obviously has a great deal of care about. With that being said, though, Randy, there's a lot of talk these days about fighter pay and about the injustices the fighters still have in the MMA industry. Obviously, you come from a quite a different time in many ways. How much of those conditions, if at all, improved, or do you think we're still in a very similar position to where we were when you were?
I think we're in a very similar position. I think the contracts are very restrictive. They're still trying to take all these athletes' ancillary rights, which is one of the things I stood up and fought for when I was educated on what an ancillary right was. I already discussed the percentages of pay that are going out to the fighters from any given event. Again, I think the transparency in the marketplace, eliminate the restrictive contracts, create a free market environment for prize fighters, for athletes that want to make their living being a professional athlete. And I don't think much of that's changed. If anything, me shining a light on the contract issues back in 2001 and then on again in 2005, 2006, 2007, they closed up a lot of those loopholes. They made the contracts even tougher. And that certainly, I fought for what I needed in my contract and what I thought was best for my career. Unfortunately, athletes moving forward, I shined a light on some of those loopholes and some of those issues with the contract, and they closed a lot of that. So that made it tougher for future athletes, which certainly wasn't my intent, but that's the boat we're in. So I think until we organized, until everybody, especially guys like Francis, guys like jonjones, until those athletes step up and are willing to put it on the line, just like Curt Flood did in baseball, we're going to continue to be in this boat and get the short end of the stick, frankly.
No, 100%. And a man you mentioned a couple of minutes ago who, like him or loathe him, is doing a lot to shine a light on this issue is Jake Paul. He does talk about it a lot. With that being said, what do you think Jake Paul signing with the UFC, with the PFL, what do you think Jake Paul can do for the PFL brand going forward in this year?
Well, certainly has a huge audience and a huge following. His handlers have been very smart about the fights they've gotten him in. He's calling himself a disruptor in boxing. He says that he wants to be a disruptor in MMA as well. We've created a very specific format. We spent 5 years now developing that format and that meritocracy. It's all about going out and winning fights and scoring points. It's not about rhetoric. It's not about smack talk or any of those things that most of us associate with Jake Paul. So there's a little bit of a dilemma, at least for me, how this unfolds. I think they're going to give him the time he deserves to get his feet under him and make the transition from being a boxer to being a mixed martial artist. They did that with Kayla Harrison. They're doing that with Clarissa Shields right now. Here's a 2-time gold medalist in boxing and a boxing world champion that they're giving time to get MMA into her blood and figure out how to operate in the MMA world, because they're apples and oranges in many, many ways. I suspect that they're going to allow Jake Paul to do the same thing, but at some point push comes to shove, and I think he has to be thrown in the deep end with all the other fighters. The rhetoric and all the other stuff isn't going to cut it. This is the PFL. You got to go out and win fights. So it'll be interesting to see how he makes that transition, where he decides to train, who he decides to train with. Hopefully, he gets about putting himself in some uncomfortable places, especially when it comes to ground fighting and submission skills and the wrestling part of our sport. And he definitely has the boxing thing going on. He's a formidable, powerful athlete in boxing. He's demonstrated that. Not to be critical, he hasn't really fought a full-on real striker. You know, Anderson Silva's probably the closest to a real striking background that he's faced. In my opinion, he's strategically picked the right guys to box against. He's not going to get that luxury in mixed martial arts. He's going to have to fight whoever he gets matched up with, and however that shakes out. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's definitely going to bring attention and eyeballs to the PFL, which, you know, ESPN is already doing that. You know, I think 8 of our shows this next season are on big ESPN, not you know, just streaming or not just ESPN2. And I think there's a statement there. We're definitely getting ratings. We're making waves in the sport. We've signed some amazing talent, and Jake Paul is one of those. So it'll be interesting to see how all that unfolds.
100%. But in many ways, Randy, I couldn't imagine 2 people who are more dissimilar than you and Jake Paul. Do you like Jake Paul? Have you met him? Have you had any?
I have not met him. My understanding is that he was in Unbreakable at, you know, Jay Glazer's gym in LA at one point before any of us knew who he was, and he started boxing. And I think I shook his hand there, but honestly, I don't remember. It wasn't, you know, there was nothing specific that happened or that was said. We didn't train together. Obviously, I'm very, very good friends with Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley. They wrestled at Missouri. They're amazing grapplers, amazing mixed martial artists. We represented Tyron Woodley for a long time as his management team. So certainly tuned in to see those boxing matches and to see everything that he's doing. I've been willing. I'm not a fan of the smack talk and all that other stuff, but he is stepping up and shining a light on the disparaging difference in fighter pay between boxers and mixed martial artists. And for that, I'm willing to get behind him, give him a chance. I look forward to actually interviewing him, shaking his hand, looking in his eye, and getting a real sense of what kind of person Jake Paul is. I don't know that at this point. So
100%. Last question from me, last subject I want to talk about, because it's making the rounds over the last few weeks, and I just want to give you it as a blanket question, take it out however you like. But what do you make of the UFC Slap League?
The UFC, you know, I saw a slap fighting event with Logan Paul, Jake's brother, at the Arnold Classic last year, and it was like watching a train wreck. I mean, you couldn't take your eyes off of it. Of the 5 fights I watched, 3 of them were knockouts. It was pretty crazy, and the crowd went nuts. So I get it. You certainly have to question how they got these things sanctioned, because I mean, you're literally just slapping each other in the face, and there are a lot of knockouts, which signifies you're doing some pretty significant damage to each other, which, you know, with football and everything else that's going on with CTE and all the other stuff, all the other questions in our contact sports, you know, this seems a bit crazy, honestly, but no denying it is a spectacle. You cannot not watch it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Randy, it is always a pleasure to get your time. It really is. I thank you once again, and I would love to speak with you before either before or during the 2023 PFL season.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's good to see you.